Hello, BookTube. I thought we'd do a quick end of the world live stream just in case we don't get a chance to do it again. I've been busy writing and reading all day long, and so I haven't had a chance to make a live stream before now. A hideously late hour for most of you. Uh, but the world stands on the brink of World War III, and of course, World War III will be a lot different than World Wars One and Two. No one will be exempt because World War III will almost certainly release into the atmosphere gigantic amounts of lethal radiation, which will travel by Earth's convection, the currents of Earth's atmosphere, all the way around the world to every last possible outpost of humanity, as we learned on in the average book and the fantastic movie On the Beach. No one will be safe from World War III. And World War III looks like the nuclear clock must be at a mere fraction of 1 second away from midnight. What with I don't know what worries me more about the day's stories in the news. I don't know what worries me more. The idea of fighter jets scrambling from multiple locations with Russian jets as their targets, or the move along, nothing to see here, calm boilerplate statements being issued by NATO. I don't know which of those two things worries me more. The fighter jets alone are worrying, but maybe not all that worrying because that sort of stuff happens all the time. Uh, Russians, the Russian military is notoriously provocative in that way. They don't announce themselves. They don't warn anybody. They pose a clear danger to air lanes navigation. So it's constantly necessary to be up and about and buzzing around and worrying about them and wondering if they're there or not or what their intentions are. I don't so much worry about that as I do the very bland sort of newspeak, nothing to see here releases by NATO, as if NATO didn't know what it certainly does know. The writer of those releases certainly does know the whole world is on edge about the idea of the Russian military. The whole world is on edge about that. So if you're going to go to the bother of writing a press release, at least reflect that. And if your press releases scrupulously do not reflect that, if your press releases sound like South Bend, Indiana uh, meetings minutes from the civic council board, just as boring as that. When you're talking about multi-million dollar aircrafts with a huge amount of destructive ability flying at each other over European airspace, if that's the subject that you're talking about and you're talking about it in a world that's already on edge about the Russian military, it seems like you'd probably want to reflect that a little more in your statement. And the fact that you didn't makes me think it's a lot worse than anybody's being told. Makes me think that we're a lot closer than anybody has been told, to the unthinkable. And I want to keep in mind, I'd like you to keep in mind, a lot of you, some of you, are too young probably to even think about this. Some of us, some of the people who are in this live stream, I'm sure, who will watch this video, remember it very, very well that it doesn't have to be a Hollywood style armed confrontation between two planes that causes things. All it has to be is one clerk, one lieutenant commander somewhere who's having a bad day or whose boss is having a bad day, who doesn't get the right memo at the right time, who drops something. If you look at if you read any of the books that have come out in the last 10 years on incredibly close calls to the unleashing of full-scale thermonuclear war between the United States and the Soviet Union or Russia, if you look at some of the stories that we know, keep in mind there are plenty of stories that we don't know, but if you look at some of the stories that we know about how close we came, how close the world came, once it starts, it can't stop. The minute it starts, it's not like it's going to happen. One missile is going to hit Minsk, and then cooler heads will prevail. It's completely locked in once it starts. So all you're talking about is all that's necessary to make it start just once. Just once. That's all it takes. and when NATO fighter jets are flying off from many different countries in order to chase presumably Russian fighter jets, you're a lot closer to that happening. A lot closer. You're about as close as you can get. Uh, Having watched those stories as they have progressed, although they haven't progressed, there's a clear information lockdown going on, uh, with these bromides being issued for press releases that just they terrify me more than a press release saying, you know, make out your will. A press release that says, oh please, I hope you're all doing well. It's just terrifying under these circumstances, and you might think, well, okay, these circumstances are really bad. They've been in the background while Steve has been working all day long, and that's why he summoned us all to a Ninja Steve stream, just so that he could let off steam and talk about it a little bit new. New, you underestimate my ability to turn literally anything into a Boston Irish Catholic guilt trip. This is one of those things, because you know what will survive a thermonuclear war? Your voice, if you're writing. Your writings will survive a thermonuclear war. Almost certainly, in some form or other, they will. If the raw paper doesn't recover, the information will. It'll be on servers. It'll be on machines that might not be as affected by radiation. Even if paper burns, it's entirely possible, if you write, that the writing will survive. So, have you written today? Do you have a project in mind? Are you working on getting your voice out into the world? Are you doing that? Or are you not? And some of you might think, well, um, I'm not, but there are other kinds of immortality. There aren't. Okay, let's be clear about that. There aren't. Since we're talking about the end of the world, since we're talking about immortality and mortality, there aren't. First of all, you have to operate under the assumption that there is no afterlife. Neither you, nor I, nor any human being who has ever lived has ever produced any kind of indication that such a thing exists. So if it does, it's going to be the ultimate lucky bonus, but you can't act that way. You can't act like it does. So leave that off the table completely. But then you might say something like other forms of art, other endeavors, other efforts that I could make to make sure that my name outlives me. Well, just last year, or it might have been the year before that, COVID screws my sense of time. Just last year, a 110-year-old apartment building was knocked down here in Boston. Boston is a very history-conscious city. Don't knock things down willy-nilly, even if they're 10 years old. We've kept an eyesore of a city hall up for a long time now, when it should have been knocked down the day it was finished. That apartment building was big. It was artistic in its own way. It had to be utilitarian, of course, but it was a feat. And its main architect, the guy that conceived it and made it happen, that rose it from the ground, was an Italian immigrant who came to America specifically a century ago, more than a century ago, specifically so that he could practice his art with greater chance of success than he had in his own country. And when he was finished with that project 100 years ago, he was certain that he had made his mark on the world. And if you were to dig around in Boston municipal records, you might be able to find out his name, but the building's gone. And no one thought to take pictures of it when it was brand new, when it had just gone up. There were announcements, but that's a tenuous kind of survival, very tenuous. That's less than a footnote. Whereas, boy, the sirens never end. Just never. They just never do. But they could get a lot worse. They could get a lot worse. One of those fighter jets, imagine Spain sends up a fighter jet because of some bogey on the screen that is probably Russian, or maybe even that the pilot says is Russian, that the transcripts, the pilot says he's chasing a Russian, that he's made visual contact. Say that Spanish fighter jet, that Spanish NATO fighter jet, experiences engine trouble and goes down in the ocean. What are the squad comrades of that fighter jet pilot likely to do the next time they make visual contact with a Russian vessel, with a Russian plane, right? Then all of a sudden there are human elements involved. And we are so close. And all it takes is one exchange. One. That's all. Now, that apartment building did not survive. It's gone. In 2 years, there'll be no hint of it, no trace that it ever existed. You'll never even guess that there was an apartment building there before, just like the house that I'm in right now. If you looked at this house, you would have no idea the going business that was done on this premises 100 years ago. And you would certainly have no idea what this patch of ground looked like 200 years ago or even 150 years ago. But writing, we have a ton of writing from 150 years ago, a mountain of writing from 100 years ago. You should be writing. You should be writing. Your writing will survive you. Your writing may teach things to future years, to future people. Oh my God, there's a chat. There's 39 people here in 10 minutes. Let's see here. Joseph David Quinton says, hello, friends. You're supposed to be directing all of your conversation at me. Okay? The rest of them are wicked pissa losers. I don't know how many times I have to go over that. And Michael Lombardo says, well, you figured out how to screen grab an image from Failsafe for your announcement. So there is that. Yes, I figured it out too late. Scorchster says, well, if Putin starts a nuclear war, his name will be immortal without writing anything. I don't think so. I don't think so. Not if nobody's around to read it. But Duncan McCurdy says, evening all. When did this start? What have I missed? It's not evening all. It's evening Steve. Do I look like an all to you? I should be all to you with a capital A, but I'm not a crowd, and the rest of them don't matter. It's evening me. And you have missed me saying that Europe, and by extension the rest of the world, is on the brink of thermonuclear annihilation all day long, and that therefore you should be writing. You should be writing. You should be writing. Anyway, Steve Ballahan says, I just Googled the Boston City Hall, and it's not a pleasant sight. No, it's ugly. It's hideous. I protested against it the whole time. And it stands on the grounds of a vibrant, wonderfully seedy neighborhood called Scully Square, where there were bookstores that were demolished while they still had store credit of mine. What good is that store credit to me? And you'd never guess. This is the point I'm trying to make with the apartment building story, is that you'd never guess what was there. You'd never guess what that concrete canyon once was. Scorcher says, Shorter says, also, if you send all the Sirens people to concentration camps, your name will be immortal too. Hamilton Thompson says, my question is, which lucky 5 imaginary YouTube friends would be invited to Friday calzones? Well, if I had a magic, if I could snap my fingers, it would be a rotating basis until you've all been subjected to it. No reason David Murphy should suffer alone. Let's see here. Michael Lombardo says, a former house of Hillary Clinton. What's just one house? It was a whole neighborhood that was leveled. Scully Square was leveled. There's one big subway plaque near City Hall that still immortalizes the name Scully Square, but you'd never know, is what I'm trying to say. People invested their whole lives in that area, and you'd never know that it was even there. J. Scott Phillips says, I'm only halfway through your Friday reads, and I just saw there was a live stream. I'm burning Steve at both ends. Burning Steve at both ends is something that many, many detractors throughout the years have wanted to do. Maybury Book Club says, hi, Steve. I'm just here for the siren rants. I trust that you are enjoying 7 days in May. I trust that you are. Joseph David Quinton says, hello, Matthew. No. Matthew is a loser. Just look at the size of his cats or the size of his house. You should be saying hello to me. Duncan McCurdy says, sorry, evening, Steve. I have been thinking about you a lot with all the Madison Cawthorn news. Yes. I've got a lot of emails about Madison Cawthorn. People seem to think that just because they heard about him first from me, that I'm somehow responsible for him. And I want to tell people, I'm not. There is someone who's responsible for him. He, of course, is an idiot, right? He's a pretty boy. He's an idiot. So he's not responsible for any of the fascistic, quasi-Hitlerian things that he says on a regular basis. But there is somebody who is responsible. He does have a sock. He's a sock puppet, but there's a hand up his tuchus, and it's a 5 foot tall tobacco addict named Will Witt. That's the brain, if you want to call it that, behind Madison Cawthorn. Madison Cawthorn is just a little unformed baby Hitler newt. That's all he is. It's just a Hitler newt. Want things my own way, violence if you don't agree with me. Anyone who's not me has less than I do, gets less than I do. All that sort of thing is just organic, I guess, in the program, and totally non-sentient. He is entirely non-sentient. But he's also a massive tobacco addict. Massive. And that's a bonding brotherhood with his brother in Christ, of all things. God, less Christian people, it'd be hard to imagine. It's a massive bonding element with a kid called Will Witt, who is, when people say, how can this Madison Cawthorn guy possibly have a coherent thought in his head? He can't. He echoes the thoughts of Will Witt. They spend a lot of time talking about how great the world would be if they could set it in order. Let's see here. Paul Rosendale says, I'm picking up 7 days in May tomorrow at the BPL. You're in Boston? You should be here for Wine and Calzones if you're in Boston. What's the matter with you? You're going to pick it up. Does BPL stand for Boston Public Library? Let me know if you would like me to send you an ebook. But if you're picking it up from the library, like some sort of 1930s war widow, then I guess you're not reading it in ebook form. Let's see here. Scorchter says, I want my name to be immortal for sending every person who listens to loud music and extermination. Oh, that's right. You're having the problem with the loud music. I had that problem once upon a time, a long time ago. I had that problem, and I eventually just had to leave. It wasn't going to work at all. There was one example in one place where I lived where the people who were insistently playing their music really loud, they were all on public benefits. They had a million kids crawling around in the street and in the gutter. They were drunk in the middle of the day with open containers of alcohol. And I think I told this story on my channel. The police came by and told them, turn this music down. And you might want to get those kids out of the street so they don't get killed. And then they drove off thinking nothing of it. And the music went right back up. Louder, even. The cops came back and they were clearly annoyed. In Boston, anywhere in America, you don't defy the police unless you're an elected member of Congress. And they said, I thought we said turn the music down. Turn the music down. Now, make it so that it's off for the rest of the day. Don't make us come back. If you make us come back, we're going to be angry. And sure enough, the music went back up. They came back, and one of the cops just read the riot act to these drunken trolls sitting on a curb, said, look, this is not going to happen again. If I come back here, I'm bringing a paddy wagon. I'm going to arrest all of the adults, and all of the kids are going to be taken into Boston Family Services. They're going to be put in the system, in other words. So they'll be in holding facilities and then group homes until they're sorted out for adoption. You don't get them back until you can prove that you're providing a state-approved family home. The only reason you didn't have to prove that the first time is because they're yours. Once they get taken away from you, you have to sue for them the same way anybody else does, and you'll never see them again, effectively. What the author is trying to say is playing your music this obnoxiously loud in the middle of a day, in the middle of a street, worth the total destruction of your world? You lose your physical freedom for who knows how long, and you never see your kids as parents again. And they decided to do it. The cop didn't know, and then hadn't been gone a fraction of a second when the music went right back up. And sure enough, 15, 20 minutes later, a whole squad of cars and paddy wagons came. They all started shrieking like apes in a zoo. Their world totally destroyed because they wanted to play their music loud for one more second. That was an example that I watched the whole thing with my dogs. I was just stunned that anyone could be so stupid, so self-destructive. And then the other situation, it was the whole neighborhood that was like that. So 8:30 in the morning, the stereos get turned out. So they are pointed out of the apartment, meaning you can't hear it all that well inside the apartment. That because you hearing it is not the point. The point is to punish everyone else for I don't know what reason. And that situation was so bad that I just had to leave. Eventually, I just had to leave. I knew it wasn't going to be fixed. Let's see here. J. Scott Phillips says, "Isn't John Philip Sousa loud music?" Well, I have headphones, you know? Everyone in the world has headphones of one kind or another. My teenage boys used to never take theirs out unless I told them to. Uh, uh, Wes B says, "South will rise again." Okay. Alexis Curie says, "Hi, Steve. Excuse me. You like Sousa. Have you tried Scottish pipe and drum, which is a lot like and older than Sousa?" Scottish pipe and drum might be a lot like and older than Sousa, but it's not American. Okay. Uh, Booknick says, "Seems pretty extreme for music." Yes, those people, they lost everything. They literally lost everything. They lost their physical freedom. They lost whatever job they had to go to the next day. They lost their kids. It just it was just total mindless autopilot, as some people are. They just think, I am going to do what I want to do, and that's it, and that's it. Which brings us actually back to Madison Cawthorn, who's the exact same way. I'm going to do what I want all the time, and I'm not going to think about it at all, no matter how many times I am reminded of thinking about it. uh, Moon Poem says, "Oh, in my neighborhood, it's the dreaded leaf blowers." Yes, yes, we had a problem with those here, but of course, Boston Police Ordinance acknowledges that men who are using leaf blowers are a severe danger to themselves, other people, the world at large. They essentially are zombies, like in a zombie apocalypse movie, where you just have to take them out. You can't cure them. You can't get them to let go of the leaf blower. You just have to shoot them off it. And we had a rush of them, but they're all gone now. They provided an afternoon's entertainment as the police surrounded them and shot them to death. And then you have to get sort of a bomb removal squad to pry their fingers off controls of the gas-powered leaf blower, because the last thing you want to do if you're a man is touch the gas-powered leaf blower when you're trying to get it out of the hand of the zombie that you've just had to shoot. Because if you're a man and you touch it, it takes control of you too. And then all of a sudden you are just mindlessly pointing your gas-powered leaf blower at a tree or at bare concrete for hours on end, while everyone around you is not only screaming at you to stop, but throwing things from windows, because you're not going to do it. You're not going to stop. So, uh, well, let's see here. El Castillo says, "My girlfriend just dumped me because I keep cheating on her with my favorite bro tuber saint, Steve Duncan." You're too good for her. Alexis Curie. I hear a lot from boyfriends and husbands whose wives and girlfriends are often notice that there's this weird old guy on the TV. And who is that? Who is that weird old guy? Or even worse, they'll be at a mall and their husband, who's never wanted to go to a bookstore before, will say, "Hey, I want to go over to that bookstore. Steve mentioned something." And they're like, you can see the gears going in the head of them saying, "Wait, he doesn't have any friends named Steve. What's going on? He doesn't like to read. What's going on here?" Alexis Curie says, "Wes B, go crawl back onto the rock you crawled out from." Ooh, harsh words. Did I miss something from Wes B? I must have missed um, something in the chat. Let's see here. Oh my. Uh, João Miguel Paleo? Probably pictured that, didn't I? Late night here in Portugal. Hope you are doing well. Well, greetings to Portugal. Uh, Fizzle Beef says, "Boston sounds hardcore." Not really. No, not if you're white. But leaf blowers, that's true all over the world. It's a well-known medical fact that if you're a man of a certain age whose penis doesn't do what he's liked it to do for the last 10 years, and you give him a gas-powered leaf blower, he suddenly becomes a full-blown Genghis Khan level monster. And cannot be stopped from doing it until you kill him. You have to shoot him off the device. uh, let's see here. Jesse says, "I took a break of writing to watch your live. Worth it." Yes, the live was going to be exclusively about writing, but then I had to frame it in terms of the end of the world. Because once fighter jets are scrambled, we are on the precipice of the end of the world. Whether the news tells you that or not, the news will probably be obsessed with Madison Cawthorn or some idiotic footnote. But we are clearly on the brink of thermonuclear war, and it's a little alarming that I have watched the news all day long and very few people are even bothering to mention it. We're talking about leaf blowers in this live stream. But I was going before that, before the world came to an end. I was going to talk just about writing. I've got a lot of emails in the last few years. In the last few years, in the last few days, I've got a lot of emails about writing, about making more writing videos. I don't know why I'm considered an authority, since the whole month long I've been saying, when is Camp NaNoWriMo? And it was in April. I missed it. It was in April. I just plain missed it. Let's see here. Scorster says the days when there are leaf blowers at the university campus is just hilariously unbearable. The professor's like, if you're considering this enzyme, and then the blowing comes. Yeah. And they just keep doing it no matter what you tell them. I've got a dying patient. All the babies in the maternity ward are screaming, you're driving us insane. This is against the law. They'll just keep doing it. You have to kill them. Let's see here. Harrison Rex says gateway drug to the leaf blower is the gas-powered weed eater. Yeah, I don't know why people just don't let things live. Leaves, just let them go. The wind will take care of them. Weeds, never understood that. Caleb says, hi, Steve. My girlfriend and I are planning a trip to Boston this fall. What are the chances you'd be interested in meeting up with a couple of millennials at the Brattle? Are you crazy? Of course I would be. Of course I would be. Chris Wilson says, I'm in the UK in one under 10-word sentence. Who is Madison Cawthorn? Well, first of all, Chris Wilson in the UK. I'll use however many flippin' words I want. All right. I'll go on at any length I want. If I'm too prolix for you, I'm sure you can find morons who are having live streams right now who will talk to you in the requisite number of words. Good Lord. But in answer to your question, Madison Cawthorn is an idiot and extremely dumb and dangerous South Carolina congressman here in the United States, who's been making the news quite a bit in the last week, with one story after another coming up. The strong speculation being among political savants that the power structure in North Carolina is floating these stories to the press one after another in order to destroy the guy. He's 28, I think, and he's a moron, and he's confined to a wheelchair. And every story in the last every day in the last week has had some story about him in one way or another. And the stories that aren't reaching the press are far worse than the ones that are. I don't care if he gets drunk and puts on women's lingerie. I don't care if he makes sexually charged innuendo jokes with a male friend. I don't care about even insider trading. There's a lot worse to this kid than that. The sooner he is gone from American politics and doing some sort of dumb commentary on some alt-right Nazi broadcast, the better for everyone. I think it's going to backfire, though. Whether that speculation is right or not, this attention is in the warped world that America is now. Attention is purely good. It used to be that attention was bad because if it put a spotlight on you, the law could follow. But there are no consequences for people in power in this country anymore. None whatsoever. It's not just Donald Trump who could shoot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue. Madison Cawthorn has been caught 2 or 3 times now trying to board a plane with a loaded gun. He would be in a jail and on every no-fly list in the country if he were anyone who wasn't in power. But since it's likely that he would be a Gauleiter in a new American order, the laws don't apply to him. And if the laws don't apply to him, that means any attention that he gets, no matter how bad it is only good, because there aren't any consequences. So I think the plan is probably going to backfire. But let's see here. Alexis Kiri says, yes, that idiot in Moscow will probably throw a nuke opening Gambit. It looks likely to me. It looks likely that this largely, or at least allegedly unidentified jet activity, with NATO jets scrambling to chase after or warn or whatever something. It seems clear from the implication that all of those somethings are Russians, are Russian aircraft. I find it hard to believe that in all of those exchanges, that all of those encounters, there's been no exchange of gunfire or weapons. If there hasn't been, imagine when there is. It won't be far off. Trying not to think about it, because I actually do have work to do the rest of the night, but it's horrifying. I think we are on the edge of thermonuclear war. which I didn't see coming even 2 days ago. It's just today's news that has really made me think, not only is this really bad, but a bunch of people in a position to know are going out of their way to make it seem like it's not, unconvincingly seem like it's not. Let's see here. Leo Percara says, I saw Better Than Food book reviews review The Road. That guy needs some guidance. Yeah, I get a lot of questions about Better Than Food book reviews. I get a lot of questions about him. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. He's moderately well read. He speaks well off the cuff, but he is a raging a-hole. He doesn't even trouble to hide it. And if he did, I don't think he could. Even if he tried to hide it, I don't think he could. He is every single possible bad association that anyone could possibly make with what reading is or what it does to you, he makes. He is the living embodiment of the very worst kind of argument to get people to read. And I'm sure that if he heard that, he'd say, I don't care. I don't care what anybody thinks about anything, ever. Not a way to live. Very juvenile way to live. But he's beyond guidance. Oh, I mean, you're right. He needs guidance, but he's totally beyond it. I would be willing to bet that he has not listened to anyone about anything, even trivial and factual, in 15 years. I bet it's been 15 years since he listened to anyone about anything at all. Is that road a dead end that ends in a cliff? Yes, it is. You shouldn't take it. None. I don't know how you get that way, and I don't know how you come back. I hope that it never happens to me. Bookins and Books says, another live stream some of us are trying to read. Just started M by Antonio Scarati. You just started M. I've been having so many problems writing a review of that book. I wanted to go on for 5,000 words, but I kind of like to hold myself to under 1,000 words. Pretty tough to do with a book like that. I hope you're enjoying it. Chris Wilson says, is he the guy who brought a gun to something important? Yes, he brings guns everywhere. Yeah, he also had a gun on his person on January 6th when he was very much wanting to be part of the riot to overthrow my government. He is guilty up to his eyeballs. The point I was making is that these stories about him driving with an expired license, or punching a tree, or maybe implicated in insider trading or whatever. I love the story saying maybe he's implicated in insider trading. There are tweets. He did it. It's not his maybe implicated. I'm saying it myself. He did it. He bragged about it. He knows there are no consequences for him at all. I mean, Matt Gaetz is self-evidently guilty of child sex trafficking. He's still shooting off his mouth about everything under the sun. He knows he's never going to be visited by law enforcement, much less taken into custody. But it's not the silly distractions of Matt. Not that it's not silly to try and bring a loaded assault weapon onto a plane, much less do it many times. That's not silly, but it's the treasonous stuff, that it's the seditious stuff that he did and very much wants to do again. That, of course, is the most dangerous stuff. Anyway, El Castillo says, we have a natural way of disposing of leaves down here in the Caribbean. They're called hurricanes. Yes, you're gearing up for a new hurricane season. Yeah. And it doesn't look good. The portents don't look good. Here's hoping that the Caribbean and everywhere else gets off as lightly as they did last year. Last year at this time, the portents also did not look good, but the season was relatively mild. I shouldn't say that. The season broke every record in the world in terms of hurricane formation, frequency, that sort of thing. But most of them were what meteorologists refer to as fish storms. They did not affect land. That's largely random. Meteorologists like to say it's not, but it is. It's largely random. Which means that last year we could have had 10 landfalls with major hurricanes. Imagine that. Just for a minute, imagine that. If there were 10 instead of 2 or 1. A season in which there are 10 instead of 2 or 1 would have all but the most Paleolithic, quasi-fascist Republican senators tripping over themselves to introduce climate change regulations. But so far, it is not tangible. The surface temperatures of the ocean waters, which is where hurricanes draw their strength, it's literally what they feed on, are higher than they've ever been, everywhere. So here's hoping that the portents are bad. Here's hoping that the portents are wrong, and that the Caribbean and everywhere else, especially Puerto Rico, is largely spared. That would be great. Chris Wilson says, sounds awful. Thanks for the explanation. Well, you have your share of them too in the UK, right? As I don't need to tell you, you have your share of them. It's just we have more of them here in the United States. These weird new Hitlerians that don't know anything and have all sorts of echo chamber bubble slogans that they repeat instead of thinking about anything. It's just used to be that we had a few of them. We've always had some of them in American politics, but usually they were on the fringes. They weren't elected. They were just out there making noise. But anyway, NP Hunt says, I really hope I missed a question before that ended in what should I read? I can't see any more of it than that. But NP Hunt says, I really hope the end of the world is a bit delayed. I've booked next week off work, plan to read Dracula for the 150th anniversary of publication. You're not telling me you've never read Dracula before. I hope you're not telling me that. Although 150th anniversary of the publication next week sounds like a good reason to reread it myself. Not that I ever need any reason to reread it. And we will see if I'm wrong about the end of the world. Certainly, I would feel oddly more comforted if more well-known pundits and world event observers seem to be giving this the attention that I think it deserves. This is drop the plates on the floor important as far as I'm concerned, and other people don't seem to be seeing it that way. Let's see here. Hamilton Thompson says, "Isn't that the guy who did Lines of Cocaine with Mitch McConnell?" Well, Mitch McConnell, well, he's the guy who got into trouble with his own party by saying that he had been invited to drug-fueled sex orgies. And he was talking, he's admired the people who were doing the inviting for years and that he hangs out with them. Well, that's not going to be Democrats. So it has to be Republicans. And also his infamous comment about what he saw spoke in the vocabulary of someone who participates in that world. Do you know what a key bump of cocaine is? Do you, if you had to Google that, then it's because you've never done one. And if you don't have to Google it, it's because you have. You have. It's not that you've seen someone else do it. So, anyway, Alexis Curie says, this is the end of Beautiful Friend. The end. This is the end. My only friend. You're quoting a lyric of some kind, aren't you? John Philip Sousa doesn't have lyrics, so it mustn't be approved. Yes, you're quoting a lyric of some kind. Is it the Pixies or something like that? Hamilton Thompson is back. I actually come from the shipping forecast. Stay for the geopolitical rants. There's only one geopolitical rant tonight. That's all. I promise this live stream will not go long. There's only one geopolitical rant. When I hear the words scrambled NATO fighter jets, I seize up a little. And when it happens in the context that these stories have been out all day, it's terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. Not because I think, that this is some sort of concerted effort on the part of the Russian military to attack alliance airspace, mainly because it only takes one little mistake, one tiny little mistake, one misunderstanding, one hothead, one nihilist. That's all it takes, is one person. And then suddenly it's a cascade that no one can control and that no one will survive. And that's just terrifying to me. I guess it doesn't do any good to be terrified of it, but I just wish I'd seen something of that concern reflected in the news commentary of the day. Maybe it'll come tomorrow. Maybe people just need time to process or whatever. Maybe a lot of news commentators are incredibly young. Maybe they don't remember the Cold War. Anyway, Scorchter says, many scientists are afraid of admitting randomness and contingency in the world. In my area, it took a long time for people to simply accept genetic mutations as random. Are you referring to random human activity in my little rant as a parallel? NP Hunt says, no, it's a reread referring to Dracula. Good. I'm pretty sure I don't want any losers in this chat who haven't read Dracula. Good Lord. It's been a while. Have I ever done an actual Dracula read-along? I don't know that I have. It has so many devoted fans on BookTube. I'm sure I could find people to do it. Maybe for Horror Mayhem. It's right around the corner, right? The Bookish Brides made Horror Mayhem, maybe for that. NP Hunt says, Whitby are trying to arrange a Guinness World Record for gathering people dressed as vampires at Whitby Abbey. Is that true? Connor says, I've read Bret Easton Ellis. I know about cocaine. Okay. Let's see. Jim Morrison. Okay, so the lyrics weren't the Pixies. They were Jim Morrison, naturally. Calvin, I missed your comment. Scorcher says, I was referring to what you said about hurricanes. Oh, okay. Well, okay, hurricanes are a lot more benign an example of randomness than some random Russian MiG pilot who decides, better that the world die in flames or whatever. Tronzo is here. I was just reading the Roman Revolution when I got the sudden feeling that a Stevestream was afoot. Well, yes. If you're reading anything even remotely connected with the Hanna-Barbie, then you know that I'm here, since I've been around them forever. Thought they were the real deal. Never put my money on Caesar. Never at all. Watched a video just a little bit earlier today from Tyler over in California, where he stands on a swivel chair on wheels in order to show his viewers his thigh tattoo. So he could easily have been filming him falling and breaking his neck and then just staring into the camera, unable to move, unable to call for help. Who stands on a swivel chair on wheels? Who does that? Let's see here. Chris Wilson says, first I've heard of jets and I wanted to know more, so I went to the BBC homepage. Nothing about them, but I do know which MP was watching porn in Parliament. Great. Well, if you look around, you'll see news stories. I don't know why the BBC wouldn't be covering it, but you won't see enough news stories. That, in my opinion, you won't see enough world stories of this. I think it's incredibly important. I don't know why it's not being. Anyway, Trish Bovell says, again, I've been too busy to pay attention to something. And then you mentioned Walter Cronkite, who I actually met. I've talked to him a couple of times. Bookish Brian says, horror mayhem. Yes, indeed. You're coming up with a horror event just in time for the end of the world by thermonuclear annihilation. Hamilton Thompson says, don't tell me that a nice isolated little war is someone's answer to a looming recession. Well, I don't know who exactly. I'm assuming you're referring to Putin, who has doomed his country financially, economically, by fundamentally misreading the world. Like so many with autocratic ideas, he just does not believe that the world is in the 21st century. He just doesn't believe in modern technology. I honestly think he thought that the first time that the West would learn about his tanks rolling into Ukraine would be a week later in print newspapers, like when he was coming up in the KGB in 1980s. The idea that every single Ukrainian has a cell phone, I don't think it even occurred to him. It's so infuriating that the world is going to be destroyed by morons. It would be satisfying if it were, the Red Skull or Dr. Doom. It'd be satisfying for somebody who was really smart and sharp and was doing it for purely defined and purely evil reasons. But morons who don't understand that there are audio recordings in the world today. John Petter says, is it all Kissinger's fault opening up to China and all that? No, no, it's not the fault of anything that happened 60 years ago. No. Nick Piccarilli says, you've praised The Essential Dracula a lot. Are there other books you'd like to see get a similar edition, but haven't? All of them, but especially all the popular classics. Oh my, all the popular classics would be great. Give me an Essential Jaws. Wouldn't that be something? I'd do it myself. I'd do it for free. Hamilton Thompson says, World War II solved the Great Depression. Let's give it a try. NP Hunt says, you definitely haven't done a read-along of Dracula yet. This would be the year to do it. And horror mayhem, just even more of an excuse. Probably true. The Bookish Brides, the very creators of the horror mayhem. Steve, are you a fan of short stories of M.R. James? Yes, very much so. Especially How Fear Left the Long Gallery. What a story that is. Oh man, it sticks with me forever. It's so predictable, but I loved it. Just loved it. Chris Wilson says, I once drilled a hole in a wall standing on a swivel chair on wheels. All right, well, then you and Tyler would get along. I was on the edge of my seat when he did that on Earth. What on earth would you do that for? I also don't really understand, I guess, a little bit of Greatest Generation old guy cluelessness on my part. I really don't. On one level, I don't understand. I mean, Tyler he teaches school, high school, I think, in California, and he's doing a video on a public channel, cursing like a drunken sailor, and showing his tattoos on a swivel chair. The idea that his students could easily find that and watch it. I don't know how you would keep discipline in the classroom the next day. Uh, I guess it's all maybe that attitude has entirely changed. Uh, let's see here. Martin S says, "Do you like any of the pre-Bram Stoker vampire stories?" No. And neither does anybody else. Okay, and neither does anybody else. Okay, let's make sure we're clear on that. If someone tells you, yeah, that Dracula's okay, but I really like Carmilla or Varney or John Polidori, they're a hipster doofus. They don't mean it. They didn't read the works. They're a hipster doofus. In the hipster world, X might be fine, but something that came 30 years before X that no one's ever heard of is much better always. They're lying. On every front, they're lying. Connor says, "We do not deserve to be destroyed by morons." It seems fitting. Maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. It's just, yes, Michael Mullins agrees with you. It was always going to be morons that were our undoing. Okay, and Scorcher says the world is built and ruled by morons, and it will be destroyed by morons. All right, well, you people sure are the life of the party, aren't you? But you're probably right. Hamilton Thompson says the Dow Jones went down 1,000 points. Some say the stock market averages are anticipating instability, conflict. I don't know how anyone, the stock market, the news agencies that are supposed to be talking about this stuff and can't get enough of Madison Cawthorn. I don't know how anyone could look at the news today and not think we'll be incredibly lucky if we're still around tomorrow. I don't know how anybody could look at the news today and think that and not think that. And yet, well, like I said, maybe it'll be all over the news tomorrow. I don't know. Alexis Curie says, Steve, just to update you on the LOTR modern cosplay in multiple comment streams. First Russian was Mordor and Putin was starting. Now Russia is Rohan and Putin is Grima wearing Tom. Okay. All right. Tom Joad says, need to buy gold and silver. All else will fade. Okay. You go ahead and tell yourself that. You need to buy gold and silver and do what with it if all else fades. Connor says, we do not deserve to be destroyed by morons. Oh, wait, I read that already. J. Scott Phillips says, speaking of thermonuclear holocaust, thoughts on Lay Brackett's The Long Tomorrow. I like it. Tom Joad says, everything's set for a great reset. Russians pegging rubble for gold, a great reset. I'm hoping that's sarcasm. Yeah, that's just what we need to be talking about. Stupid, gussied up anti-Semitism. While there's saber rattling going on over the skies of Europe, that's definitely what we need to be thinking about is 1930s anti-Semitism. The Bookish Bryants are back. Hi, Steve. I need a good end of the world chat. Well, I'm trying not to make it just that. I'm trying not to. I was going to talk about writing and how if it's going to be the end of the world, we should all be writing. Gina Stand Your Books is here. If want something to sell at the end of the world, I buy cigarettes and toilet paper rather than gold. It's the gold and silver is a big prepper type thing. Unfortunately, there's a huge amount of overlap in the Venn diagrams of preppers and anti-globalists. You get that talk in all kinds of circles. It's always very depressing. Bookish Bryants. I remember this from Alas Babylon. We need to hoard all the salt. Yeah. You should be mainly concerned. Where you are, you should be mainly concerned with your own ability to survive without the system, without the grid. You should be mainly concerned with that. If I remember correctly, you are a good 6 miles from the nearest high-profile target. I could be wrong about that. But if I'm right about that, then the worst that you're going to have to deal with is pretty much the same as what you would have to deal with if a massive hurricane were to hit you. And it's the kind of thing that I talk about on my channel all the time. Do you have a gas-powered generator? Do you have cans of gas? Do you have a pallet of gallon water bottles? You can assemble these things fairly cheaply if you do it with enough foresight, but you need a gallon of water per person per day. You need a couple of really good kits that have basic first aid, basic structure construction, water purification tablets, water purification straw or a filter of some kind. Even if it's a gravity filter, those will work if that works. But are you able to live without the grid for anything for a week? maybe even longer than that. And the ability to create that readiness is not prepper paranoia. That everyone in the United States is way overly dependent on the grid always being there. The power goes out and people just say, oh, well, we'll just sit here in silence for a while. It'll be back in 15 minutes or half an hour. What if it doesn't? What if it doesn't? Do you have enough food? Do you have, dried or non-perishable food? Do you have good can openers, good first aid, shelter? Do you have enough water? Do you have a radio? Basic things like that. But anyway, Michael Mullen says, I vote for talking about writing. And if we're going down, just wanted to say thanks for your great contributions to the reading writing community. We should talk about writing. You should all be writing. Maybe not now, not at this exact moment. You want to be listening to me. But if the world's going to end, you should be writing. Hamilton Thompson says, Steve, should I be reading The Road to Prep for Tomorrow? Yeah, you want to carry the light, man. Alexis Curie says, and England is the Shire. Oh, you're still on the allegories. Scorcher says, good thing the end of the world is here. I can't finish any writing without a deadline. Tom Jones still trying to go to reaction out of Steve says The Road is an excellent book. It manifestly, objectively is not. It manifestly, objectively is terrible. Can be proven in every line, in every paragraph. The only way, if I go about it, I did a 4-part video on how horrible it is in every line and every paragraph. The only way that you can defend it when you're done hearing that, since my examples don't leave any room for contradiction, the only way you can defend it is to say, well, I really liked it, and that's fine. That's good. Just don't tell me it's an excellent book. Just tell me that you liked it instead. Those two things aren't the same. Hamilton Thompson says, cans of tuna fish. Canned tuna fish is very dehydrating. Do you have enough water? Simple question. Just, do you have enough water? You should have about 20 gallons in gallon jugs of water anyway, at all times. You should have a cabinet full of canned soup that you rotate by expiration date. At any time, at all times, you should have that. Maybe a few packets of vacuum sealed packets of seeds in case the grid is out for a long time. NP Hunt says, I definitely second the vote for writing talk. I emailed Steve about it earlier tonight. Well, you always can email me. Tom Jones says, I have stored food for 1 to 2 years. That's very good. Finally. That's very good. Bookish Brian says, Tom Jones is trying to start a fight with that kind of talk. Well, yes, but I have bigger fish to fry with fighter jets in the air over Spain. The Bookish Bryants continue. As for writing in the face of nuclear war, I would stick to folk stories, ballads, and lore. I'm a storyteller. It would be tragedy to lose them. But did you write today? Both of you. Did both of you write today? People who say, I'm a storyteller, I love this kind of writing, I love that kind of writing, usually when I get down to cases with them, they haven't written in a week. Or more than that. And the day's events in the news underscore the urgency of that not being true. Even if the day's events weren't true, you're still going to die in about 10 minutes. You're still going to die in about 10 minutes. So there's still a deadline. But anyway, oh my God, I'm missing the... Alexis Carey says, so what would be the best book to read for the end of the world? The Postman. I like that movie. The book's not all that good, but there's a long tradition of post-apocalyptic literature. I mentioned On the Beach earlier today by Neville Shute. Not that great a reading experience, but a really thought-provoking book. There's Brinkley's book, The Last Ship, about a vessel of war that is caught on the open ocean when thermonuclear destruction decimates the rest of the world. There's A Last Babylon by Pat Frank that's really, really good. But anyway, Scorster says, I have half a kilo of chicken in my fridge. That's it. It's 1 day of food. It doesn't have to stay that way. You can do this very gradually. And don't forget, of course, when you buy your grocery shop up for the week, add a few cans of non-perishable items for yourself and your pets. Extra. Just a few. Barely add anything to the total bill. But do that every time. Set them aside in a separate place until you have a stockpile. And then while you're doing that, also think about a bag. Fill a backpack with stuff that you need. A really good multi-purpose tool, a really good knife, not a cheap one, a really good battery-powered flashlight, whole bunch of moisture sealed matches, something that will allow you to start a fire. Uh, Basic first aid, basic tools like that. Make sure that you have a bag like that. Once you fill it and everything is sealed and everything is just the way it should be, you can largely forget about it, just as long as you and everyone in your household knows where it is. Uh, anyway, John Petter says, have you recently read Brave New World? The writing seems bad. It kind of does, yeah. Kevin JN says Swan Song is a good read for these times. Swan Song is pretty good as these kinds of books go. The Bookish Brian says Tom saying The Road is a good book. It was a joke. Nick Piccarilli says either way, I'd prefer not ever to hear the fighter jets are scrambling, but they were. They have several times in the last few days. That's bad. No matter how calmly NATO wants to write it up, that's bad. That's really bad. The fact that they're willing to admit it is really bad. Uh, anyway, Chris Wilson says it's interesting that prepping seems to be an almost uniquely American thing. Nobody here would be that fussed about surviving if it means cleaning out a few shelves in the garage first. Well, it could happen there too. I realize that the U.S. has more preppers than any other country, but nevertheless, and there, I'm not meaning to to elevate them. Most of them are crazy and also again anti-Semitic, but it's amazing how that works its way into everything. I just don't understand that, but it does. But the basic tenets of what they're talking about make sense. You are completely dependent on a grid about which you know nothing, and that in most countries, especially in the West, is intensely vulnerable. A kid with a Molotov cocktail could do it serious harm, and not to mention the internal problems with it that can happen on their own without anybody doing anything. You should reduce that complete dependence in America anyway. Trish Boval says, I always have too much in my pantry. I grew up in a rural area where we only grocery shop once a month. Okay, good, great. So all you would need to do with habits that are already firmly in place would be make sure about the water, a whole pallet of gallon bottles of water, a whole pallet full of them, 20 at least, as a start, right? Because it's a gallon of water per day per person. That adds up quick. That needs a lot of stockpiling. It doesn't have to be gallon bottles. It can be, there are all sorts of things that you can do for economical storage. But water, and then also tools. Do you have matches? Do you have a radio? That first aid, that sort of thing. Michael Mullen says, I like the Postman too. Always liked Waterworld. Maybe I'm alone, but yes, I did write today. I write every day, usually for hours. Very good for you. I also liked Waterworld. Tom Jode is back. I am not a huge comic fan, but I thought there were compelling elements in The Road. A Cormac fan. No, there aren't any compelling elements in The Road. They're all dumb. All the elements in The Road are dumb. I'm hoping that if you found them compelling, maybe it's because you haven't read any of the true post-apocalyptic stuff that Cormac McCarthy was very lazily ripping off in that book. If you have, I don't know what to tell you about compelling prose or compelling scenes. If you haven't, you've got a lot of great reading in store for you where you see that sort of thing done right. PG ain't finna read that says a food stockpile without weapons to defend it is like a house without a lock. Anyway, this is depressing. Well, I didn't want to mention that because it is depressing, but you do need either cooperation among neighbors or some means to protect what you have. That's also a good idea. Some way to do that. I wasn't necessarily going to mention any specific kind of weapon, and I'm not an expert in any of this myself. Of course, the one element of this nightmare scenario that I don't have to worry about is protecting anything that I stockpile, because in my immediate area, there are probably, what if we do this 10 blocks out, there are probably 4,000 people, and 1,000 of them are dogs. So I'm in no trouble. The one element I have covered completely is that I can protect what I have. But anyway, uh, where did I leave off on chat? We're at 65 people. Hamilton Thompson says, do you anticipate the weekend papers on Sunday shows to push the imminent threat? Well, I don't know if they have an agenda. I don't know what they'll push, but I'd like to think that some people at the head of some news organizations would say, this seems a lot worse than NATO's making it out to be. This seems inherently end of the world type stuff. I would hope that somebody would at least investigate it a little, but uh, uh, and Hamilton returns. Do you stockpile Frida's food? Does Frida understand that she will be expected to take down a deer when the call is given by the howler, by the Ozark howler? I do stockpile food for Frida, non-perishable food for her, just in case. What I do is very basic, but the basics will go a long way, especially since, as was pointed out earlier in this chat, we're on the doorway of hurricane season. I'm not necessarily talking about, a Russian MiG going down by accident or on purpose onto the deck of, let's say, a Spanish aircraft carrier and kicking off World War III. I'm not necessarily just talking about that. That's on my mind because of the news programs today, or not the lack thereof. But natural disasters can do this too. Russian cybernetic attacks could take out, the electronic superstructure of a lot of the country, large chunks of it at a time. But also, we're on the brink of hurricane season, and it could be really bad. We're poised for it to be really bad, whether it ends up being or not. And there's also uh, gigantic solar flares, right? They exist. They're getting worse. We're in the middle of a cycle where they're really bad, and a whole bunch of other things. It's just a good idea. It's a good idea. If you can't live for one day off the grid, you're asking for trouble. Let's see here. Taylor Brock says, hey, Steve of 28 just tuned in. Ann SK says, Fortune's 1 second after. Yeah, 1 second after. You're a fan of that series? You like that book and the sequels? I do. I'm not, I don't. I swear, I wasn't starting this Steve stream to make it about prepping. Most of prepping is insane. Most of prepping is deeply dark, fascistic, I hate my neighbor type stuff. Most of it is the kind of stuff that, for instance, Alex Jones said on his crazy conspiracy theory show, where he said, yeah, I'm looking at my neighbor, that I'm smiling and waving to my neighbor in my neighborhood and thinking, yeah, I could take him. I might even eat him. Most of it is that bad. But even if we don't talk about S hitting the fan, even if we don't talk about the end of the world or, the globalists taking over, we could just be talking about a Hurricane Annabelle, something like that reaches monstrous proportions in record time and then turns towards land and strikes, Florida or somewhere along the deep South coast. That could be devastating. That could easily be devastating. It could be a situation where relief doesn't arrive for a week or more. Can you survive for a week without any assistance from the outside world, without any groceries to go to, without any faucets to turn on, without any electricity to turn on? Can you survive for a week without those things? That's the only question. It's just a simple question. It's not meant to be crazy. It's not meant to be a prepper question, but it's a good question. And if you can't, you should be able to. It's easily within your means to gradually reach the point where you are able to survive that. Maybe not comfortably, but anyway. Connor asked, have we mentioned Dies the Fire? Yeah, no, I haven't. It's a natural segue, isn't it? Because Dies the Fire, for those who don't know, is a book by S.M. Sterling. It's a science fiction novel about the ultimate grid going down story where nothing works, no technology works. And it happens in an instant. Everybody has to figure it out at the same time. It's really, really good. Trish Bovell says, I don't worry about me. I just worry about the kids. Well, right. It's the airplane etiquette. You have to worry about you because you're the one who'll take care of them. So you have to worry about you, even though it feels wrong to do. You still have to do it. Michael Mullen says, preparing is smart. Preppers be crazy. Preppers are crazy. They don't be crazy. They are crazy. You're conjugating the verb wrong. I live in South Texas and regularly see people waving around semi-automatic weapons. Yeah, well, in some places of the country, you're going to have a lot more of that than in others, right? In places like South Texas, everybody's armed to the eyeballs, and there are all sorts of other states too that have open carry permits, no training permits. It's just anybody can just walk around with an incredibly dangerous weapon, and they have a psychotic break or a minor heat stroke or a bad breakup, and you just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. They, decide, I'd rather be famous for 15 minutes on the evening news than live even till tomorrow. So I've got this gun. No law says I can't have it. I'm just going to open up on, I just pulled into this roadside rest stop, with restaurants and a gas station and an information booth. I'm going to go inside. It's crowded with people. At least I'll make a mark on history. So I'm going to walk in. It's absolutely mobbed with people. I'm just going to open up. Just wave back, just standing there, wave back and forth. The security guards aren't armed. Nobody suspects anything. I could maybe kill 100 people before somebody takes me out. You run the risk when you don't regulate any of these things. You run the risk that anyway. NP Hunt says maybe we should all order copies of How to Invent Absolutely Anything. Well, you don't need to invent any of these things. They're already available. I mean, do you even know what kind of food to buy that won't go bad and that has enough protein, enough calories to keep you going? Do you even know what that is? If not, it's the ultimate in pampered late Byzantine era Western complacency to just go right on not knowing when you could learn these things in 15 minutes and then start to take steps. It's nothing big. It's not world ending. It's that the next time you do the food shop, you add a few items that are for that kind of preparation instead of your immediate needs. That's all. It's easy. But anyway, Connor says it was very revealing when I saw places in Eastern Kentucky who live off the grid every day. It's like stepping into a different world. Yeah. Faisal Hadi says, "What's today's subject?" Well, we had a subject. We've diverted into the dark thicket of prepping, of doomsday prepping, which was started because I was talking about the news of the day, which is NATO scrambling fighter jets, obviously to combat Russians in the air over Europe, which seems to me to mean that on the nuclear clock, we are pretty much at midnight. If you've got active war ordnance in the air, you are as close as you are going to get to World War III before it happens. That's about as close as you can get. That's not a misunderstanding at a table in Helsinki. That's as close as you can get. And that was originally going to be my springboard to urge you all to write, to get at the writing projects that you are postponing. You should get at those writing projects, because anytime the world could be ending and you want your writing to survive you. You want to do it, at least you want to feel what it is to do it before you don't have a chance to do that anymore. Let's see here. John Petter says, random question. Well, we could pretty much use a random question at this point, couldn't we? Do you know how deep you have to be to survive an atomic bomb? How deep you have to be underground? Not deep at all. To survive, unless you're at ground zero. But even at ground zero, not deep at all. No, your question, if you go underground, is not you're surviving the blast or the fallout. It's your resources underground. Do you have an uncontaminated water spring under there? Do you have the ability to regulate temperature or some sort of atmospheric filtration of some kind or other? Since you're going to be drawing your air, unless you're lucky enough to have access to some sort of pocket of air, subterranean pocket of air. There are plenty that exist, but they're not located in any one place. You'd have to be randomly lucky. Otherwise, your air is going to have to come from the surface, and the surface air is not going to be safe to breathe untreated. But you don't have to go down beneath the surface very far to be safe. Bryce Gassner says, do you enjoy reading Belloc? Not really. I know that I should. He writes on so many subjects that I like, and yet it's just never worked. I don't know. Maybe I just was in the wrong mind frame. Ingrid Fitz says, I know this sounds depressing, but if there's nuclear conflagration, I want to be at ground zero. Do you really want to deal with eons of nuclear fallout? Well, yeah. That does sound depressing. Of course, I guess we're doomed to a depressing Stevestream tonight, and maybe the world won't exist tomorrow. But yeah, that is the fervent dream of everybody when they think it was our dream during the Cold War. During the war, the height of U.S. Soviet nuclear tension, the dream is always not that I'll be far away from the bombs when they go off, but that I'll be right there, so that not only will I not know, but it'll be over in a fraction of a second. I'll just be instantly annihilated. Uh, it's still a depressing thing. Those are depressing options. There are no good options. Uh, let's see here. Faisal Hadi says, will bomb shelters construction increase like in the 50s and 60s? Well, it's already increasing. People who are making ready-made bug-out shelters of all kinds are experiencing waiting lists and gigantic bidding wars like they haven't experienced in 20 years. There are all kinds of shelters like that. I guarantee you beyond a shadow of a doubt that, well, I don't know how many of you know wealthy people. I'm in a weird position where I know a smattering of very wealthy people, and no matter where they make their wealth, and no matter what they seem like when you talk to them on Voxer or here for Wide and Calzones, they have at least one place that's ready, usually two. The really wealthy have two. One place, one bug out shelter like that has all the necessities stocked away that they can get to if they've got a little warning, and one that they can get to with no warning at all. So one in the city and one in the country. But anyway, Connor says, theoretically, if the world was ending and everyone died, what would be the point of writing aside from personal reasons? The point would be that you don't know what's going to survive. The world has ended many times, right? So you don't know what's going to survive. Your voice could still survive. Nothing else will. But your voice could survive, especially if you're writing electronically, as Steve has already ordered you to do. If it's electronic, then you don't know. There's a chance, a good chance. Michael Lombardo says, memo to Mark Richardson: adjust the weekend grocery shopping list and buy rice, an extra pallet of water, mega stuffed Oreos, and wine. Lots of wine. I'm pretty sure that mega stuffed Oreos would survive a nuclear war. Ravens fan 1961 says, after reading On the Beach, I'm thinking maybe moving to Australia would be best. Well, the whole point of On the Beach is that you're only postponing the inevitable, right? The clouds are coming. Death is coming, even for our little community of people. When they know it, they start to crack up. Let's see here. Taylor Brock says, what are your pet peeves, or what George Carlin he called major psychotic effing hatreds? I have a whole list of pet peeves. Steve's pet peeves. It's very old. It's like 50 years old now. I add to it lovingly. I annotate it lovingly. I have many, many, many pet peeves. There are some major ones, but there are many on the list. Yes, and Michael Mullins answers Connor by saying writing is its own reward. It is. It doesn't matter that it's thermonuclear war. You're still going to end. You're still going to die real soon. You're all older to me now than you were yesterday. It's going to come in no time at all. And the writing is something that you should do before that happens. It doesn't matter what that is. It matters that it's for its own reward. It's Faisal Hadi says, then can the internet survive? The internet might not be able to survive, but the internet is just the interaction between nodes, right? The internet is like the equivalent of brain firing, of neural firing. It's not the tissue. The tissue is the vast storage acres and the all that sort of stuff. The servers where all this stuff is. It's entirely possible. Also, any device that you write on, not only is it connected through the internet to those other nodes, but it is a node on its own right. Who knows what will be extractable from it under any circumstances? It's the right thing to do. It's a tenuous connection, but I'm standing by it. Leo Percara says, Hurricane Amber Heard, destroyer of worlds. Do you have survival skills, Steve? Or do you depend mostly on dogs if you were in the post-apocalypse? I would depend mostly on dogs if I were in the post-apocalypse. I do have some survival skills, yes, but necessary ones, because when I was traveling, I did an enormous amount of hiking and roughing it. I hesitate even to say camping because I had no shelter. I wasn't carrying any shelter with me. It was almost all of it was, a great deal of it was far, far away from the next human being, with just my dogs and largely the land. I had a duffel bag with things in it, but it was largely what a lot of the neck-bearded quasi-fascists on YouTube would call rough living. So I imagine those skills are still there, buried under years and years of book reviewing. But it also helps to have dogs, right? Two of my neighbors have very healthy, mid-sized mutts. Two people up the hill two separate people have a pair of pit bulls each, and one of those pair of pitties is gorgeous. They are big, 150-pound blocks of muscle. That'd be very useful in a situation like that. Very useful. Let's see here. Connor says, speaking of Carlin, are you a fan? Is he considered dude bro? He is very much dude bro, but it's impossible not to be a fan of him, especially the older he got, the more bitter he got, right? Some of those older taped comedy specials where he's obviously an old and unwell man. So the last maybe 5 years of his career, a lot of those performances are on tape. A lot of them you can see on YouTube, and they're not funny anymore. Sold out crowd, gigantic auditoriums, but he's not doing stand-up comedy anymore. He stopped doing stand-up comedy once he got a very bad diagnosis. He stopped doing stand-up comedy. He's still up there and people are still laughing because he's George Carlin. So they think they're supposed to. But he's not doing comedy. Nothing that he's saying is funny. It's eloquent and bracingly angry, but it's no longer jokes. And it's tough not to be a fan of stuff like that. That is, I don't know what to call it, but it's extremely moving. Let's see here. Ravens fan 1961 says you would buy a little time. Who are we talking about here? Who would buy a little time? Me? Well, I'm firmly with the earlier comment. I would want to be in ground zero. Fortunately, I am. I'm a mile away from a nuclear reactor. That would be gone. So I wouldn't have to worry about it, I don't think. Faisal Hadi says, so no time to read trashy books. No, Faisal, just the opposite. All the more reason to read trashy books. If we all survive until August, I'm hoping all of you are present for trash in August. If we all live that long. Ravens fan 1961 says you could live a long time on peanut butter. It's absolutely true. Peanut butter is a great food to stockpile. A great food, high in protein, high in fat. It's largely imperishable. A very good thing to store and easy to get. Paul Zenev says Bush/Cheney killed Carlin. Oh my God! All right, we're back to conspiracy theories then. NP Hunt is addressing Faisal Hadi and saying, if you survive until August, you can read all the trash you want for Garb August. You officially have permission from Criminali. Yes, it's a little bit. Garb August is a little bit odd for me because it's Ollie's event and he hasn't made an announcement video. We're teasing and soft teasing all this stuff, but there is no official garbage in August yet because it's his event and he hasn't announced it yet. But yeah, it's entirely possible. There's an event coming in August where we read trash. Let's see here. Michael Lombardo says, did Dude Bro TM begin with Fight Club? No. It began with The Old Man in the Sea, but reached quite the pinnacle, quite the viral pinnacle with Fight Club. Faisal Hadi says, do you think Biden is the right president for this situation? No, unfortunately, no. I don't hold with any of this dumb internet talk about how he's demented or he's, dribbling in his food and some sort of Manchurian candidate for his handlers. He's just old. That's all. I know it's a nightmare to young people, but he's just old. But he has lost a step, and he'd be the first person to admit that. He wouldn't admit that he's not the right man for the situation, but I can say it. Yeah, I infinitely prefer. I know it's a little bit biased on my part, but I would infinitely prefer if we were talking about President Elizabeth Warren right now. Very much so, I would be. Someone who can get all of the briefing binders, thousands of pages of collated material, someone who can sit there across a table from 16 people, each one of whom is trying to intimidate and pretend they know best in the room, and then sift through it all on the fly and ask the right questions. Biden can't do that. Once upon a time he could. I don't think he can do that anymore. Let's see here. Hamilton Thompson says, just picked up Lonesome Dove, thought I'd start early. Somebody mentioned the lucky star, but then the question's gone. If it's Larry McMurtry, No, that's gone as well. Uh, uh, Alexis Curie says, but Michael K. Vaughan and Plagued by Visions have both announced Garb August. Well, yeah, they've talked about it. There hasn't been the event's organizer has not made an official announcement video. Maybe I'm just a stickler. I just think that has to happen for the event to be real. Marble Fawn says the late Bill Hicks reminds me of Carlin in the way that most of his stuff wasn't really comedy or bits. It was political and social commentary expressed through rage and resigned cynicism. So rage and resigned cynicism is a good way to describe Carlin in the last years of his life. What he was doing was not right. It wasn't comedy and bits. It was something else. Equally valuable, I would say, maybe even more valuable. But I give him a lot. I disagree with a lot of Carlin, but I give him props for not taking the easy way out, right? He could have coasted on his career and just yucked it up to the end, and he didn't do that. Ingrid Fitz says, perhaps we should stock up on garbage books now, long fantasy books to something. Me as our thoughts away. Okay, I lost the SAM says watching Biden give a speech is like trying to start my car when it's -30. Well, believe me, I didn't think that. I wrote editorials about this guy when he was running for Congress, when he was running for president 50 years ago, 40 years ago. It never occurred to me that, first of all, I didn't think 2022, the year 2022 would ever happen. It still strikes me as freakish. And second, I certainly didn't think that after all the time, Joe Biden would actually succeed in becoming president at the ripe old age of 80 or whatever. CVBN457 says, Steve, I just want to say thank you for all the great info. Your Western Canon starter kit helped me tremendously, gradually working my way through it. Oh, that's wonderful. Glad to hear that. Scorcher says, need the protein powder to keep my sexy 28-year-old body even after the end of the world. What good would it do you at that point? Void Being says, can you decode the line, light seeking light doth light of light beguile, means in love's labor's lies? Yes, I can, but not in a chat. Connor says, at first I was thinking your qualifications of Warren was a low bar, but then realized our leaders have been 1/4 in those 1 in 4 of those qualifications. Well, I'm selling Elizabeth Warren short. She'd be a great president, but she'll never get the chance because of Pocahontas, because of schoolyard bullies started a nickname war about her 5 years ago. So a schoolyard bully started a nickname about one line on one application form somewhere. Let's look at his paperwork. Oh, that's right. We can't. He had his fixer go around, collect it all, and burn it. Let's see here. Faisal Hadi says, will the threat of nuclear war unite the U.S.? No, it won't. No, half the United States is a Nazi majority country. And a main goal, a main personal desire of one half of this country is a fiery apocalypse that brings on the end of the world. Religious nuts. So no, it won't. It absolutely won't. Liam says, hey, Steve, I may be moving to Cambridge, Mass this year, but I've never been. Is it a nice neighborhood? Well, Cambridge isn't a neighborhood. It's a city. There are nice neighborhoods in it. It's a pretty expensive place to live. But the main thing is you'll be free to come over here every Friday for wine and calzones. All right. So Liam will be over here for wine and calzones every Friday. We'll live stream. Ravens fan 1961 says, I hope Biden holds on because Kamala is the alternative. Yes. Yep, she is. She is. I don't. I don't. It's there's really not much to say. She would be a bit of a nightmare. I thought was the wrong choice. I was hoping against hope all the way to the end that Biden would pick Elizabeth Warren. They don't get along, but Martin S. says, what do you think of Harold Bloom's The Western Canon? I like it. Michael Lombardo says, do you see Warren as the Democratic candidate in 24? No. SAM says Senator Warren stole her economic policy from Mao's Red Book. No, she didn't. I have no idea what you're talking about, but you're probably joking, right? Blue Laser Ryan says, hey, Steve, did you already give away the Jobs book? I gave away one copy, but it turns out I have another. It turns out I have 2 to give away. So Blue Laser Ryan, if you want a copy, one of them is already promised, but one of them is not, and it's all yours. Just email me. Alexis Kiri says, "What do you think of Jamie Raskin for president in 2024?" Don't get me started on Jamie Raskin. Okay, don't get me started on Jamie Raskin. The one person who more than anyone else has the power to do things and is not doing them. Not doing them. Uh, Faisal Hadi asks, "Is Kamala really that bad?" There are parts that are really bad. Yeah, she's compos mentis, and she's really smart, and she can be funny, and she can be personable. Uh, I just think I don't think she's the clearest thinker, and I think she a key quality for a U.S. president to have is the ability to drown out the crowd, not to ignore the experts, but to drown out the cacophony, to stick to a through line. And I don't think she has the ability to do that. And we went through 4 years of a president who couldn't do that at all. The last thing, as was often said about Donald Trump during his first presidential administration, you don't want a president whose firmly stated opinion when he gets in front of microphones is the opinion of the last person who talked to him, regardless of what the opinion is. You don't want a president who's like that. You want someone with a through line. Uh, let's see here. Scott Tippin says, opinion of Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time. Well, I started rereading. I reread The Eye of the World because I was up in Vermont at Mark's house and saw the television production. And I thought Eye of the World was a lot better than I remembered. So now I'm wondering if I should reread the whole of the series. It's a huge investment, but I'm wondering if I should, because Eye of the World had things in it that I didn't remember. Not events, but narrative qualities that I didn't remember. Connor says, so who would be your preferred candidate for the Democratic Party if Biden does not run? Sanders is too old. Buttigieg would be a bad candidate. He would certainly be beaten by Trump. Well, it's not going to matter. None of this is going to matter. It's not a question of who's going to beat who. The election doesn't matter who wins or loses the election if the people whose job it is to certify the results don't. Right? Then it doesn't matter who wins. If the person if the key pinch point professionals, the officials who certify the election have already decided that Trump is going to win, then anyway. Crackhead says we need a John Ruskin type. Oh, you're gone. So mention of John Ruskin, but that's it. Marvel Font says, Steve, do you expect us to move towards 2 blocks in the future, or will Russia just end up isolating itself as failed autarky, with China and India throwing them a few bones? I think, well, I'm not sure that I understand your question, but I think that Vladimir Putin would rather die and take his country with him than lose, than change. And that's very dangerous. That's what had me worried about these fighter jet news all day. Faisal Hadi says, is Joe Rogan a dude bro? He is the quintessential dude bro. He's one of their gods. They have 5 or 6 deities, literal deities, where they would sacrifice their children on the altar if these people told them to. And Joe Rogan is one of those deities. Absolutely. He's the shortest one, but he's one of them. Michael Lombardo says, is Kamala like Ultra Boy, has the presidential attributes, but can only use one at a time? Oh, a Legion fan in the chat, do we? Book time with Elvis. It's surely past your bedtime. Isn't it past your bedtime? What are you doing here? But surely it's still better to have Biden than his predecessor. It absolutely is. Yes. CVBN457 says, I expect we disagree politically on a lot of political points, but I agree with you on that. A nuclear threat would not unite. People keep saying unit. Would not unite the country. Far too many players that don't want us unified. Yes. Alexis Kiri, I made it through the 5th book of the Wheel of Time and gave up. Too long. Yeah, that's about the time when I lost all hope. The first time I made it through, I force marched my way through all the books, but that's about when I thought, all right, there's nothing here. I'm just invested. John Petter says, I heard that a targeted nuclear strike today can reach the deepest underground chamber in the U.S. No, I don't know. I doubt it very much. I doubt it very much. I'm not saying that you want to be in your basement, but if there are plenty of places that would be safe from the major prominent effects. The point is, it doesn't matter if you're safe from the major prominent effects if you don't have a clean source of water and air. Ravens fan says, I think picking a political candidate is a lot like picking a partner. The less baggage, the better. Only since the United States, since the age of social media, has criminalized baggage. I rise above my baggage all the time. Every day I do it. So do you. So Leo Percara says The Lucky Star by Volman. Is it good? I didn't like it. I don't know if that means that it's good with a writer like him. He could be writing entirely over my head. Martin S. says, does Putin have a degenerative illness? I see no sign of it. I've seen speculation that the bloat in his face is chemotherapy of some kind, and that would mean maybe that explains his behavior. I've never seen any sign of it myself. Crackhead says we need a John Ruskin type character writing 10 volumes of criticism and politics in relation to Twitter, in relation with Twitter and Boris Johnson's mistakes. Don't forget the ornate prose. Ray says Melania for precedent. What kind of precedent? Connor says, who are the dude bro deities? I assume Musk, Peterson, Rogan, who else? Yeah, you've got a good start there. People that where their adherents would literally kill for them. And they know it, but they don't care. They don't want you to kill people. They want you to give them your disposable cash. A lot of it. Because they don't have to work for a living. They'd rather frighten you for a living. SAM says, interesting how Russian stuff happens with democratic presidents. Crimea in 2014, Ukraine in 2022. No way that happens under Trump, in my opinion. Your opinion's dead wrong. That's a downright dumb thing to say. Scorcher says, since it's known, it's known China wants to rule the world by 2050. That's known. Wouldn't they do everything in their power to stop Putin from destroying the world? You can't rule the world if there's no world. I don't think anybody is really thinking along the lines that this guy might be crazy enough to start World War III. I really don't. I don't think people are thinking that. Even today, even after today, I don't think that they are. And today should change that discussion, I would think, but I haven't seen any sign of it. Book Time with Elvis says, Elvis walking time. He doesn't know it's Saturday, so that's why I'm up at 4:45 in the morning. We get up early in the Czech Republic. Better to make the most of the time we have left. Oh, Elvis is adorable. You couldn't get Frida out of bed at 5 with a bomb. Faisal Hadi says, when I watch Republican news channels, they state that the next election will be stolen by the Democrats. So how can I find out who is lying? Look at who owns the job. Whose job is it to certify the votes in your state? The Republicans can say anything they want. Whose job is it to certify the votes? Find out who that is. It's public information. Find out what they ran on. Did they run on the big lie? Did they run saying, the last election was stolen when it demonstrably was not? If it's their job, then you can't say that anyone else is stealing the election. If the person who's going to do the stealing has already made their loyalties clear, then that's how you know who's lying. And I don't know how you can make an argument that the Democrats are going to steal the election. They're not the ones. Well, anyway, Tom Jones says, too bad Ralph Nader is too old to run again. Yeah, it might perk up his retirement years to lose one more time. Alexis Curie says, okay, but what is your take on the Three Body Problem trilogy? Everybody on BookTube talking about it. Is it worth a read? I'm not technically allowed to dislike it, am I? Talk about BookTube groupthink. Good Lord. It's worth a read. Read the book, The Three Body Problem. If you're smiling at the end, if you're blown away, well, okay, the rest of it is just like that. Just like that. No huge peaks and valleys. All the Three Body Problem stands who say that the second volume is the best thing ever written and 10 times better than the first volume are simply wrong. But you'll know right away. You'll know right away whether or not this is mostly hype or if it's something that might actually please you. Void Being says, why is it the end of the world? Did something happen? Yes, something happened all day. There have been multiple reports of NATO scrambling fighter jets in response to Russian jets. It might not seem like anything. NATO's own press releases on the subject have taken the blandest, most nothing to see here tone imaginable. But that means you've got fighter pilots up in the air with armed weaponry only 1,000 feet from each other. As far as I'm concerned, that's as close as you get to World War III without World War III actually happening. Ravens fan 1961 says, Steve, speaking of Elvis, what is the best Elvis bio in your opinion? Oh, there was one. Oh, you know that I'm terrible with author names, though. There was one that was really good. Oh God, I can picture the cover, but I have no idea what it was called or what the author's name was. If you email me, I will look at the lists on Goodreads or Amazon, and it will jump out at me in a minute which one it is. But I don't remember anything at all. Scorcher says, could Obama come back for a third term? No. Tom Joad says Obama is probably running the country now. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I'm sure. He's running the country and making the frogs gay. He's a largely disinterested private citizen. uh, uh, let's see here. Ray says, do you think Crime and Punishment is overrated? No, not at all. Especially the Michael Katz translation. Might want to investigate the Michael Katz translation. I hear it comes well recommended. Michael Lombardo says, is Chris Pratt being groomed by Schwarzenegger and the Kennedys for president? Chris Pratt certainly, no matter what his fans say, no matter what case they make about how fairly he's being treated or unfairly he's being treated in the media, he certainly wants to be president. Yeah. He will tell, if you ask him in an interview, he will flat out deny that, and he is just bald-faced lying. Private conversations that has come up a million times. Liam says, sorry, as you are the only Bostonian I know, I have another Boston area question for you. How is the public transportation? Is it reliable? It's reliably bad. Yes. It depends entirely. If you are living on a branch of the MBTA that serves powerful politicians on Beacon Hill, if you're on the red line or certain branches of the green line, then it'll run like clockwork. But if you're on the orange line, for instance, or God forbid, the blue line, you takes your chances. Let's see here. Do you think Pete Buttigieg would be a good president? He'd be an excellent president. It'll never happen, but he'd be an excellent president. CVBN457 says, I haven't found many videos of yours discussing horror fiction. Do you enjoy horror / short novels? What are some of your favorites? I don't enjoy horror at all. No, not really. Not much. Some notable exceptions, but then again, they aren't very horrifying. I mean, Dracula I can't live without, but horror novels, no. The horror genre doesn't do anything for me in books or in movies. Tom Joad says, do you think Middlemarch is overrated? No. No, it's not. If anything, how can you overrate a work of stunning genius? Void Being says, ever read R. Scott Baker's Prince of Nothing trilogy? No one I know who reads fantasy has read it. You've just asked a have you read it question to Steve on a live stream. So it really is the end of the world. I have read it. Yes. Oh my God. Faisal Hadi says, Steve, did you hear that Spotify dropped Obama's podcast? No, I didn't hear that. Why would they do that? Martin S. says, I have the Katz translation. I'm yet to read it. Whose name is on it? Take a look at that cover. Any familiar names on the cover? I'm wondering. SAM says, can you say park the car and Harvard Yard? Alexis Curie says, I don't even know who Chris Pratt is. I'm so out of it. Yeah, you are. You're wicked pissa old. Ray says, do you think Tulsi is a Russian asset? Well, yes, in the sense that she has had all sorts of dealings, financial and otherwise, with all levels of Russian government that she actively wants to keep hidden. Then if that counts as a Russian asset, then yes, but that would apply to most of the Senate. Connor says, is the 2-volume Elvis biography by Peter Guralnick the one you're thinking of? No, it's not. No, it's not. Oh, it's driving me crazy. That's still bothering me. Crackhead says, will we get a post-apocalyptic Library of America 2-volume set, hardback, sewn binding of Elon Musk's tweets? I'd buy it. Who'd read it, though? Aside from you. Blue Laser Ryan says, he is a bad one-dimensional actor. Oh, you referring to Chris Pratt. Well, he's a bad one-dimensional actor who's holding up 2 different multi-million-dollar franchises. Martin S. says, what's the best war novel of the last 100 years? That's tough. Oh, I'd almost want to say it's impossible unless we restrict it to wars, specific wars, war by war. Otherwise, I mean, one of the first things that came to mind was The Naked and the Dead by Norman Mailer, much as I hate to give it to him. That's one of the things that I would mention, but also The Cruel Sea by Nicholas Montserrat, and also one that isn't usually ranked, Birdie by William Wharton. Although that's almost impossible. That's almost impossible to answer. You'd have to go war by war. Uh, let's see here. Jesse says, "Is Dennis L. McKeown a good author, or should I stick with LOTR?" I I have the Hunter I really liked. I think I would probably like it even more if I could find a paperback copy. I would love to reread it. I think I would probably like it even more. It's very much Lord of the Rings, though. I mean, it's very much a pastiche of Lord of the Rings. So, you don't stick with Lord of the Rings if you've already read it. You definitely want to keep reading. You want to branch out. But oh my. uh, let's see here. NP Hunt says, if you could make one suggestion to improve AuthorTube, apart from step away from the Stephen King's On Writing, what would it be? Uh, oh boy. Well, yeah, I wouldn't really have anything to do with writing advice. It would have to do with general YouTube advice, which I feel like I'm in a weird position to give general YouTube advice, except I watch so many YouTube channels of all kinds where the person doesn't know what they're doing. And I'm not talking about technical expertise. Obviously, I'm in no position to talk about technical expertise. I'm talking about your delivery, your personal affect on camera. Are you a droning moron who's constantly looking in the wrong place, who's giving all of your sentences that kind of and then we will do this now. To make yourself sound like an android? Are you totally different than any normal person would be in real life? I, so many YouTube channels do that. So many AuthorTube channels do that. They try that flat, put the emphasis in the wrong places, like airline stewardesses who have read the same pattern so many times that they sound like telephone answering machines. Who wants to watch that kind of crap, whether it's AuthorTube or anything else? I would have a lot of things to say about how that is done, uh, uh, and how it could be done better. Uh, Michael Lombardo says, I think Jack Edwards is blurbed on the cover of the Cat's translation of Crime and Punishment. Yeah, can you imagine what that blurb would be? It's like a long book. Like, oh my God. I dropped the book as soon as I opened it. Isn't that like me all over? uh, let's see here. Uh, uh, will unions increase? And are you pro unions? Unions will not increase. No, they'll be hunted to extinction. Uh, Uh, Joseph Coverley says, "How does a real great biography affect your enjoyment of the individual's work?" Largely not at all. I mean, the acid test for that is Pat Barker's big book on the Bronte sisters, right? I went into that loving their work and loving their work in a certain pecking order. I read that huge book. The book is fantastic. And I went into it thinking, well, if anything's going to do this, if anything's going to change my opinion of an author's work, even to rearrange the rankings, it's going to be a biography like this. And it didn't move anything. So uh, Hannah's Books is here. You are back for late night stream. Wonderful. I just tuned in. Did you answer the question about Joel Williamson? He's written about Faulkner as well as Elvis. I don't recall a question about Joel Williamson. Scorcher says, the thing AuthorTube needs to fix is that many of them are illiterate in the canon. How can you teach someone how to write if you have never read Hamlet and they only read new SJW autofiction? It is very noticeable. Let's just be diplomatic and put it that way. It's very noticeable how little AuthorTubers have read. They make a point of religiously reading each other, but it's very noticeable that they don't have almost no experience in reading anything else. It's noticeable, and I would think for most viewers it would be damning, but apparently it doesn't affect the viewers at all. They don't care. It's just, I mean, all these people tout writing books, and in every one of the writing books that they tout, which they do not read, obviously, in every one of the books that they tout, the first thing that the author says is the key to good writing is to read constantly, and they don't do it. They obviously don't do it. I have my issues with AuthorTube. Let's just put it that way. Ray says, would you try the dark academia aesthetic? I largely think it's dumb. I imagine it could be done well. Alexis Curie says, Bird by Bird, a great book about writing by Anne Lamott. Michael at Fit to Be Read is here. I guess the Canasta Club broke up. I caught Jack Edwards' review of the Byzantine book you got in the mail yesterday. Insightful. He wouldn't even know which end of it to start on. Marsilio Ficino, like that's a weird name. I guess he's going to appear in every live stream. Connor says, "Did you mean Juliet Barker for the Brontes?" Yes. Yeah. I think Pat Barker was too busy. Oh, did I say Pat Barker? Oh my god. Oh my god. Sorry. I meant Juliet Barker. Yes. I didn't mean Pat Barker, and I didn't mean Peter Parker either. So, Faisal Hadi says, "Do you think the YouTube algorithm controls most creators? When you start to pay attention to it, it starts to control you. Yeah. You shouldn't care. That shouldn't be why you're doing this. If you look at 3 videos, if you use the YouTube Studio to put you in touch with the algorithm, and you see this one got 400 views, this one got 30 views, and this one got 200 views, but I really like making the 30 view one, but I'm going to make the 400 view one forever now. What on earth? You didn't care about that subject anywhere near that much before you knew there was a YouTube. Now all of a sudden it's the only thing you talk about because of a number. Anyway, let's see here. Liam asks, any favorite drinks other than water and wine? Tropicana Pure Premium Orange Juice with no pulp. If it has pulp, if you buy pulp by mistake, I will pour the bottle over your head. But mostly it's water and wine. Yes. Let's see here. Crackhead says, have you read Roy Foster's 2-volume biography of W.B. Yeats? What are you expecting me to say in answer to a question like that? Are you honestly expecting me to say, oh, I've heard about that, I mean to get to it someday? What are you expecting me to say in answer to a question like that? It's unbelievable. Heisel Fadi says, where's Fretta? Do you mean Frida? She's right here. She's right next to me. Oh, aren't you, baby? She's right next to me, as always. Let's see here. Jesse says, I have another book question. The Duncan Wood Chronicles by William Harwood, a good book series. You have the best advice. I don't think you're going to like it. I think it'll be, you'll consider it much ado about nothing. There are all the things that the author is expecting will carry you through multiple books. Don't even get you through one book. So I would say no. Try it, definitely, but I mean, if it's your cup of tea, try it. But Fit to Be Read is off to the Ryan Landry Theater Appreciation Club. I swear, his clubs never give him a minute's rest. Alex Keary says, okay, what do you think about All Quiet on the Western Front, a war novel? It's a good war novel, sure. Ray says, how many hours do you read a day? An average of 10 hours. A little more than that in April, I noticed. April was a really good reading month. Michael Mullen says, I have to second Bird by Bird. Is it that you don't like writing books at all, or do you have specific problems with Lamott's book? Bird by Bird and On Writing by Stephen King. Chris Wilson says, apropos of the prepping and of pulp discourse, smooth or crunchy peanut butter? Smooth. Blue Laser Ryan says, what are some of your other favorite movies besides The Lion in Winter? Well, there are lots of them. Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Jaws 2, Beckett, Long Day's Journey into Night, 12 Angry Men, Patton, there are all sorts of them. Sky High, for instance, a terrific movie. Let's see here. Michael Mullen says, have you read King Lear? Have you read the Bible? Have you read Dante? Well, he's asking me if I read it's a 2-volume Yeats biography. I swear. Foster's Yeats. Anyway. Let's see here. Michael Lombardo says, I still can't understand how Twitter is worth $44 billion. Can someone explain how they make money? In this case, it might not be about money. Taylor Brock says, I dislike YouTubers who use hype, epic intros with their logo. Yeah, I largely do too, unless I like them. I hate those things unless I like the person. Then cut to the person in their house, poor lighting, casual wear, maybe some junk in the background, and acting as if they are a network. Yeah, there's a lot of that. Not always. Some people who have those kinds of theatrical flourishes care about them. They care about them, right? And it's not our place to say, with your own channel, here are the list of things I don't want you to care about. That's not our place to say as viewers. If you care about it, fine. As long as it's genuine, then fine. It's just a lot of times it's not. Oh, there's the baby. There's the baby. That's all any of you were waiting for. The baby has made her appearance. Oh, hi, baby. oh, it's because she's awake. She wants to go out. All right. Well, this has been a 2-hour live stream anyway, and that comes first. It's too bad because the chat, we're at 72 people, and the chat is jumping with all sorts of interesting things to talk about. All sorts of. I mean, and P. Hunt says Bird by Bird is just a smattering of obvious advice within a memoir, getting very close to some of my own objections to it. But the chat is just firing on. But you have to understand, well, obviously, if you watch my videos, then you already know. If Frida is up and wants to go out, then the chat has to end, right? I mean, that's the very definition of having priorities. So I'm afraid I'm going to have to wrap this up right when we're getting good, right when the chat is full of long-winded paragraphs of interesting provocations. I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap it up. But you did, excuse me, you did take my mind off impending World War III. That was wonderful. That was just what I needed. I'm hoping that I can keep it off that subject while I get a night's worth of reading done. That would be great. but I am going to have to wrap this up. I'm very sorry. I'm very sorry because this is so much fun. I swear. Why did I not do this from the beginning? This was just so much fun. But you saw the bean. If she's awake and she's asking me to stop and pay attention to her, then I have to do that. So there'll be plenty of time. There'll be plenty of time for conversation tomorrow or the next day or whatever. Just remember your questions and we'll come back to it. But I have to go. My master calls, so I'm going to see what she wants, see what she's okay, and call this thing to a halt at the 2-hour mark. So we reached 75 something people. That was the height for this time around. Maybe we'll go a little higher next time. But I am gonna wrap this up. Thank you very much for keeping me company and for getting my mind off scrambled NATO jets. This worked a lot better to do that than even making a video would have done. So thank you very much for that. Then again, I have so much to thank you people for, not just that. But anyway, I have to go, so I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you all for coming. I will announce the next Steve stream as far ahead in time as I can manage, so that I'm not catching you all by surprise. And I'll see you then. Thank you, Book 2.